Let the heart of them rejoice that seek the Lord. Seek the Lord and his strength. Seek his face evermore. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord and call upon his name. Tell the people what things he hath done. Tell the people what things he hath done. Glory be. Now, Christians, let's all join and sing number 225. So hear the word of the Lord. Thou therefore gird up thy loins and arise, and speak unto them all that I command thee. Be not dismayed at their faces, lest I confound thee before them. For behold, I have made thee this day a defenced city, and an iron pillar, and brazen walls against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, against the princes thereof, against the priests thereof, and against the people of the land. And they shall fight against thee, but they shall not prevail against thee. For I am with thee, saith the Lord, to deliver thee. This is the word of the Lord for the people of the Lord. Thanks be to God. All right, amen. Now, our brother Rich is going to play some special music for us. If you remember, a couple months ago, we did a song, Revelation song, I believe it was, which he set to the tune of a Neil Young song. And so he's got this morning a gospelized version of Unchained Melody.
Thank you, Pastor Corey.
and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. Amen. All right. Well, gird up thy loins. We're going to hear from the Lord this morning. We are now to chapter 38 in the book of Job. As we remember, Job had answered his friends and their accusations, and then the last couple of times we heard from his friend Elihu, who had more of the same, basically, to say, and Job never even answered them, or answered his claims and accusations. And if you remember, last time the storm was building as he was finishing what he was saying, and at this point, storm has arrived, and God is in the storm. And we begin at the beginning of chapter 38, which says, Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who has laid the measures of it? Tell me if you know, or who has stretched the line upon it? So God finally answers Job. But he does so with about 77 rhetorical questions, not one of which has anything to do with the sufferings of Job, or the sufferings of anyone else, for that matter. And evidently, the purpose of the book of Job, in spite of the opinions of most commentators that I've seen, the purpose is not to answer the question as to why the righteous people suffer. Most people think that must be what this book is all about. And even though this is the burning theme throughout the entire dialogue between Job and his critics, and a very important question to all of us, too, God never answers it at all in his 4-chapter response here. Instead, his questions all have to do with his great creation and man's responsibility thereto. And evidently, that's God's great concern. He's rebuking Job, the things that he said, and all people indirectly, not for sinning or for their lack of faith. Job had passed those tests almost perfectly, really. Instead, God seems more disappointed in their inability to answer his questions about creation. So, they were supposed to learn, understand, and care for its creatures. We are. We're supposed to care for the creatures of his creation and all the resources that he has provided for us. And more than 2,000 years has passed since then, and little has been accomplished. Really, it's been more like 4,000 years. And even with the most righteous of men more concerned about their own affairs than about God's creation. So this is actually taking place, we think so, about 2,000 years after creation. and it's been 4,000 years since then. And God's first question is obviously a rebuke to those who try to explain the origins of all things through natural evolutionary processes instead of believing God's supernatural creation as explained to us in His Word. And God continues here. He says, "Where are the foundations fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy." So God's talking to Job about the creation of the earth, about nature, pointing out that Job knows so little about nature. "Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? What did I fasten the foundations upon?" he asks. "When the morning stars sang together." And concerning the morning stars, we know that the word star oftentimes refers to the angels. And you remember in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, when the dragon was cast out of heaven, he took a third part of the stars with him. So referring to the angels that fell with Satan. The stars of heaven were not made, we figure, probably until the fourth day of creation week, whereas the foundations of the earth had been laid on the third day. Thus the morning stars were the same as the sons of God or the angels. All right, the stars of heaven referring to the celestial bodies, like stars like the sun, moon, those things, were created on the fourth day. And angels are also referred to as the sons of God, as in the first chapter of Job, when the sons of God were presenting themselves to God, and Satan also came with them. In the New Testament, we are referred to as the sons of God. But in that case, it was referring to the angels. "Beloved, now are we sons of God. It doth not yet appear that what we shall be, but we know that he shall appear. When he shall appear, we will be like him, for we shall see him as he is." That's from 1 John, speaking of us as believers and the sons of God. So Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. That's a special classification. And what a glorious scene that must have been when God created the earth and the angels, the morning stars, all sang together. Sons of God. And God continues, "Who shut up the sea with the doors when it broke forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and the thick darkness a swaddling band for it." Well, God's talking about the earth here, his creation of the earth. "Who put the bounds for the seas? When I allowed the waters to gush forth as a child out of the womb," he's saying. "When I made the cloud a garment of the earth, and the thick darkness a swaddling band for it." And I think that the Lord is reminding Job of the great flood, when mighty waters gushed forth or broke forth from the fountains of the great deep within the earth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened up. Because God mentions here making the cloud a garment of the earth before the rain. And it seems that before the flood there had been no rain, and perhaps no thick clouds like that. "And I broke it up, for in my decreed place I set the bars and the doors, and said to the seas, This far you shall come, but no further. And here shall your proud waves be stayed. So during the flood, it says that the great ocean basins were formed, confining the seas to their present location now. He continues here in chapter 10. In verse 10 of 38. Have you commanded the morning since thy days, asking Job again, and caused the day spring to know his place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it? It is turned as clay to the seal, and they stand as a garment. And from the wicked their light is withheld, and the high arm shall be broken. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or have you walked in the search of the depth? Have the gates of death been opened unto thee, or have you seen the doors of the shadow of death? So he's still asking Job all these questions that he really can't answer. And God mentions here the springs of the sea. It's another interesting scientific point because it's only been in recent years that we have discovered that there are springs in the depths of the sea. And many such scientific mysteries have been explained in recent years by modern science that are coming up here that they would have had no idea of at the time. And many of the questions that God asks here are still unanswered today. Now go back to verse 2. He asks, who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Well, God is rebuking Job and his friends, like Elihu, for talking about things that they don't know anything about. Like, have the gates of death been opened to you? Have you been beyond them? Do you know what is there? Because if you remember, Job was saying, oh, I wish that I were dead, where all is silent, where there is no memory, where there is no thought. Oh, I wish I were in the oblivion of death, where man is at rest, where everything is at peace. And God said, Job, have you been there? Have the gates of death been opened to you? You're talking about these things, Job, but you don't know anything about them. These were things that Job was saying, but God is rebuking him here for saying them. And he says, have you perceived the breadth of the earth? Tell it if you know it all. Where is the way where light dwells? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? Where does light dwell? He asks him. Tell me this, where does the darkness go when you turn on the lights? Where does the darkness hide? Well, it must go somewhere, right? Someplace very close, because all we have to do is flip off the lights and it moves right back in. But where is it lurking? I don't know. But God is questioning Job and saying, where is the place where light dwells? Where is the place where darkness dwells? And another interesting discovery of modern physics is that light dwells along a way, continually traveling at an immense speed. But darkness, on the other hand, dwells any place where no light is on its way. And he continues, that you should take it to the bound thereof, that you should know the paths to the house thereof. Do you know it, because thou wast then born, or because the number of thy days is great? Have you entered into the treasures of the snow, or have you seen the treasures of the hail? Well, as we know now, there are beautiful treasures in every snowflake. You know, under a microscope, you can see beautiful, intricate geometric designs, perfect patterns, and no two of them are alike. Now, how did Job know that when this book was written? He wouldn't have. God's asking him, have you entered into the treasures of the snow or the hail? But then he says something even more interesting, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war. By what way is the light parted? How is light divided? God asked. We know now that we can indeed divide light. Men have developed a spectroscope where we can actually divide light into compartments. And God was speaking about the dividing of light before man ever knew it could be done. It can be divided into definite areas through a spectroscope, but God is challenging Job about this thousands of years before such a thing was discovered or developed. Who hath divided the water course for the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder, to cause it to rain on the earth where no man is, or the wilderness where there is no man, to satisfy the desolate and the waste ground, and to cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth? God asks, who waters the wilderness, Job, causing the wilderness to bring forth grass and flowers and all? Has a rain a father, or who has begotten the drops of dew? Out of whose womb came the ice, and the hoary frost of the heaven, who hath gendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Out of whose womb came the ice? Another interesting question having to do, I think, with the worldwide flood and the ensuing ice age. And it's interesting, too, that the book of Job has more references to snow, ice, and cold than any other book in the Bible. Can you bind the sweet influence of the Pleiades, he asks, or loose the bands of Orion? Can you bring forth a Mazzaroth in his season, or can you guide Arcturus with his sons? Well, the Pleiades, as you may know, is a constellation. It's a little cluster of stars, also known as the Seven Sisters. And God said, can you bind the sweet influence of the Pleiades? And astronomers now know or believe that the Pleiades actually is the center of the gravitational forces in our Milky Way galaxy. And God is asking Job, can you bind the sweet influence of the Pleiades? Likely hinting to that this is actually the center of the gravitational forces of our galaxy, which would hold things together as our solar system rotates around it. So again, more interesting things. Then God asked Job, how would you like the job of guiding Arcturus? Arcturus is a big star. It's known as the runaway star. It travels at about 125,000 miles per second. And God asked, how would you like the job of steering that through the sky? It's larger than our sun. So guiding that at that speed through the sky down stars and planets, it'd be quite a job. Do you know the ordinances of the heaven? Can you set the dominion thereof in the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, that the abundance of water may cover thee? Can you send lightnings, that they may go and say unto thee, here we are? Can you order the lightning? Who has put wisdom in the inward parts? Or who has given understanding to the heart? Where did you get your knowledge, Job? Where did you get your understanding? Where does it come from? Who put it there? Who gave you that capacity? Who put that DNA in there? Who created your memory cells? You know, God's just speaking of the marvels of his creation, pointing out to Job his genius. You know, David said, we are fearfully and wonderfully made in Psalm 139. And we see that in this marvelous universe. He continues asking, who can number the clouds in wisdom, or who can stay the bowels of heaven? When the dust grows into hardness and the clods cleave fast together, will you hunt the prey for the lion, or fill the appetite of the young lions when they couch in their dens, and abide in the covert to lie in wait? Who provides for the raven his food? Who is overseeing the universe, he asks. Who's taking care of the animals like the ravens? When the young ones are crying unto God, they wander for the lack of meat. Do you know the time when the wild goats of the rock bring forth? Can you mark when the hinds calve? Can you number the months that they fulfill? Do you know how long their pregnancies are? Or do you know the time when they bring forth? And we're in chapter 39 now. He's still asking. He says, they bow themselves, they bring their young ones, and they cast out their sorrows. Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee, or abide by the crib? Canst thou bind the unicorn with his band in the furrow, or will he harrow the valleys after thee? Wilt thou trust him because his strength is great, or wilt thou leave thy labor to him? Wilt thou believe him that he will bring home thy seed and gather it into thy barn? Well, the unicorn is thought to be a mythological animal. You know, these days we see it as one of those little fairy horses with a horn prancing under rainbows and things. Well, that's not what he's talking about here. Other Bible versions call it an ox. Okay, but that doesn't make any sense to me, because an ox can be tamed and trained to plow the fields and do things that God is asking. Can you do that? Okay, this is talking about something tremendous that cannot be tamed. And I looked into it, and there's such a thing known as a Siberian unicorn. And other animals like it, which are now extinct. One is called the Elasmotherium, and they were like the Siberian unicorn, giant single-horn rhinoceroses. Okay, giant hairy rhinoceroses, bigger than elephants, with one big horn right in their forehead. And it appears that's the kind of thing he's talking about. A fierce animal that once inhabited this region. Deuteronomy 33 mentions the majesty of the unicorn's horn. Like the horns of unicorns, it says, with them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth. And some of the animals mentioned in this chapter, as well as in other parts of the Old Testament, are really of uncertain identity. And various translators have tied them together to modern animals, probably because many of the animals, like the unicorn and the behemoth, which we'll talk about next time, are now extinct, because they could not long survive the drastically changed environments following the Great Flood. And modern Bible scholars, for the most part, accept the fact that things have gone on for millions and billions of years, but they never consider the very real possibility that the many now extinct animals of the past still existed on the earth in Old Testament times, at least some of them. And God continues in chapter 39, asking, "Did you paint the beautiful wings on the peacocks, or the feathers of the ostrich? And this dumb ostrich that leaves her eggs in the earth, warms them in the dust, and forgets that a foot might crush them, or that the wild beast might break them in. She's hardened against her young ones as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without fear, because God has deprived her of wisdom, neither hath he imparted to her understanding." So God's saying to Job here, "Hey Job, who has done all of these things? You know, you think you're so smart. Go ahead and see how far you can get in doing these things. Like the ostrich, it lays its eggs. It doesn't worry about, someone coming along and stepping on it, cracking the egg, because God has hidden wisdom from it. He's just let it be dumb, not care about the egg, whether it'll hatch or not. And yet with some animals, we see very strong mother instincts, but apparently not with ostriches. And God talks then about the horse with its tremendous strength and the excitement of the horse in battle and so forth. Who has created this excitement within the horse, he asks. And then on to verses 26, he asks, "Does the hawk fly by wisdom and stretch forth her wings toward the south? Does the eagle mount up at your command and make her nest on high? Who gave the eagle her instinct to build her nest way up on a cliff? Did you order that? She dwells and abides on the rocks, upon the crags of the rocks, and in the strong place. And from there she seeks her prey, and her eyes behold very far off. Her young ones also suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is she." And we notice in chapter 39 here, as well as in the last verses of Job 38, God's questions center on his providential care of his animal creation. You notice that? The implication of these questions is that man should have taken and given more attention to the care of these creatures, since they've been placed under man's dominion. And then to the beginning part of chapter 40, it says, "Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, Shall he that contends with the Almighty instruct him? Job, are you trying to instruct me?" Well, isn't that ridiculous? Can you imagine anyone trying to instruct God? Seems foolish, doesn't it? But you're looking at one right here. Amen? I mean, I do that sometimes. Now, God, this is the way I see it, and you ought to work it out this way. I sometimes think he should listen to me about how to do things, and I get upset when he doesn't follow my instructions, right? Well, that's the dumb part. I try to instruct God, and I get upset when he doesn't do what I think he should do, right? Well, God said to Job, "Shall he who contends with the Almighty instruct him? He that reproves God, let him answer it." I think he's talking to me. Job answered the Lord and said, "Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee?" And God said, "Hey, look, you've been trying to instruct me, contending with me, trying to tell me how I should do things. All right, answer me, Job." Job says, "What can I say? What can I answer, God? I'm vile." Vile means disgusting. It means cowardly. And there's this pause in God's monologue on creation when he puts Job on the spot and says, "Okay, answer." and that's all he can say. Job accepts the rebuke, basically, and confesses his sin, and finishes with, once I have spoken, but I'm not going to answer, yea, twice, but I will proceed no further. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind again, and said, Gird up thy loins like a man. I'm going to demand of thee. Declare unto me, will you also disannul my judgment? Will you condemn me that you may be righteous? Think about that for a minute, because I think quite often we're guilty of this ourselves, condemning God in seeking to make ourselves righteous. Now, we may sometimes say something like Job has. I don't know how God could do that to me. After all, when I'm so good and I'm so pure and so righteous, why would God allow that to happen to me? God isn't fair to me. God isn't just. He's allowed it to happen to me. Job was doing that. Don't go there, or you may hear some of this, right? Have you an arm like God, he asks, or can you thunder with a voice like him? Cast abroad the rage of your wrath, and behold everyone that is proud, abase him. Now God says here, do this now. Go ahead and try this. Deck yourself with the majesty and excellency. Array yourself with glory and beauty. And cast abroad the rage of the angry person. Behold everyone that is proud on the earth. Abase him. Look on everyone that is proud, and bring him low. And tread down the wicked in their place. Hide them in the dust together. Bind their faces in secret. And then I also will confess to you that your own right hand can save you. So God says, if you can do these things, then I'll confess to you that your right hand can save you. If you can abase every proud person and bring them low. Well, good luck with that. And I'll finish with a quote by commentator Matthew Henry. He said, those who listen and profit by what they have heard from God shall hear more from him. And those who are not truly convinced of sin need to be more thoroughly convinced and more humble. No doubt God, and he only, has power to humble and bring down proud men. He has wisdom to know when and how to do it. And it is not for us to teach him how to govern the world. Our own hands cannot save us by recommending us to God's grace, much less rescuing us from his justice. And therefore, into his hand we must commit ourselves. The renewal of a believer proceeds in the same way of conviction, humbling and watchfulness against remaining sin as in his first conversion time. When convinced of many evils in our conduct, we still need convincing of many more. So we best continue to listen and learn. So, you can all ungird your loins now. Put your girdles back on. Until next time, when we hear more from God about his creation and our lack of understanding thereof. And as E.G. Marshall used to say in my favorite old radio show, CBS Radio Mystery Theater, he used to say, until next time, pleasant dreams. Amen. All right, we'll finish up those words by the mighty God with hymn number 128. I sing the mighty power of God. Would you please stand? Convincing too often.